Hello and welcome to Reimagining Cyber. My name is Ben, I'm producer of the show, and our usual host, Rob Borrego, is away, so I'm going to be stinging for him today. And the theme for this episode is encryption, the backbone of digital security, protecting everything from personal messages to national secrets. And we're also going to unpack the looming challenge of quantum computing, which, of course, could one day break today's strongest encryption. But first on the agenda is the UK's largest push against encryption and what it could mean for privacy worldwide. And with me to talk about this is our other cybersecurity expert, Tyler Moffitt. Tyler, how are you doing?
Good, thanks for having me on, Ben.
And as I hinted at just then, there is an issue involving the UK government, and it involves a spat with Apple. Could you talk me through, if you would, what's been happening?
Yeah, so recently the government in the UK pushed to weaken Apple's encryption, specifically by creating a backdoor to where they can have access to essentially what they have in the iCloud and what's stored. And it's just, it's really not, it's a giant security incident failure waiting to happen, right? By demanding that Apple build access into secure systems, they're setting a dangerous precedent that will absolutely be exploited by cybercriminals, hostile nations, rogue insiders. I mean, everything. The moment you create a backdoor for the government, you open it up to basically everybody, right? And security has to be absolute. There is no such thing as a backdoor that only the good guys can use.
And how are they going about putting this pressure on?
Sure, the Investigatory Powers Act of 2016 gives UK authorities the power to demand access from tech companies, and more recently, the Online Safety Bill of 2023 is putting even more pressure on encrypting messaging services, requiring them to scan private messages for illegal content. You also have the technical capability notices that allow the government to quietly force companies to build ways to access encrypted data. Apple, for instance, has fought previously very hard against this and even threatening to remove iMessage and FaceTime from UK. However, they recently pulled this ADP, the Advanced Data Protection for iCloud backups in the UK, meaning that now UK users specifically have weaker cloud security. And so even though Apple resisted, they've now finally sort of caved and made compromises. And that's exactly what is so dangerous. You know, once you start making these concessions, the governments push for more. And, you know, from there, it sets a precedent. And we likely see other governments start to press for this against Apple as well. And so this is really a big problem that I think will escalate out of control. So for hackers, bad actors, whatever you want to call them, like this is a dream scenario, right? Government mandated access points. It incentivizes hackers to go after basically Apple now, UK agencies, or any other third parties with access to these systems. You know, cyber criminals will literally pay top dollar for leaked government keys. They'll exploit legal access programs. They'll target insiders who hold the keys to the back door. You know, once encryption keys are leaked to the bad guys, there is literally no way to keep it exclusive to only authorized personnel or whoever you deem good guys. And I really don't understand what the government doesn't understand about that. There is no way to keep this isolated only to good guys. So if a mechanism exists to break or leak encryption keys, it's going to be used by criminals, nation states, or anyone with the resources to obtain it. So and that should be obvious to the government, especially after their failures. I don't understand, after all this time, you know, have we learned nothing? Why are we still compromising the security and encryption just for more surveillance?
Intriguingly, right at the end there, you mentioned government failures.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to be honest here, very blunt. Governments have an absolute awful track record when it comes to securing sensitive data. They can't protect their own systems, so why should we trust them with an encryption backdoor? I mean, I'll just give you a few examples, right? The UK Ministry of Defense, 2023, they had multiple breaches, exposed sensitive military intelligence. The US, OPM hack. Chinese hackers stole personal data and security clearance data from millions of federal employees. The NSA cyber tools leak. Anyone remember WannaCry or NotPetya? That was because NSA's own hacking tools were stolen and used in global cyber attacks, causing like huge amounts and hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars in damages. Even Australia Medibank breach in 2019, 9.7 million citizens' private health records were leaked. I mean, I could keep going. Those are just the ones that initially came to mind. Like, the government does not have a great track record at all.
You mentioned earlier that this isn't just a UK issue. What do you mean by that?
So if the UK succeeds in forcing big tech companies like Apple to weaken encryption, other governments are absolutely going to demand the same. Like, why should we not expect countries like China or Russia, Saudi Arabia, even the US, right, will use this as justification to expand their own surveillance programs that they absolutely want. And so, honestly, to me, that sort of creates a two-tier security system. Some nations will allow strong encryption, while others will force companies to create backdoors. And this result, essentially, is a fragmented internet where security and privacy, they depend on where you live, right? And so, even worse, like journalists, activists, dissidents in any authoritarian regime could basically be easily targeted and found, searched for using these vulnerabilities, right? So we're basically looking at a future, if this is the case, where encryption is no longer universal, but basically just dictated by government policies. And, once that happens, the entire cybersecurity landscape changes for the worse by far, in my opinion. And, businesses should play a role in this fight. They must take a stand to sort of refuse to implement these backdoors, kind of like how Apple tried to resist initially. I don't know why they caved. If companies cave to this government pressure, then it sets a precedent that encryption is negotiable, which is a disaster, honestly, for just security in general, right? We have to push back. The strong encryption is non-negotiable. So definitely share this information. If you hadn't heard this story, talk to other people about it, see what they feel about it. Really support companies that fight for encryption, advocate for digital privacy laws that protect security rather than compromise it. And most importantly, stay informed, right? If you didn't know this was happening and you hadn't seen this news, you need to be learning a little bit more because it's a big one. It's definitely making waves because of the precedents.
So we heard there from Tyler about how government-mandated backdoors can raise urgent concerns about weakening encryption. And there is another challenge that looms on the horizon, that of quantum computing. Even if we defend encryption today, the rapid advancement of quantum technology could render current cryptographic methods obsolete. Back in episode 43, we welcomed veteran cryptographic engineer Terence Spees onto the show in an edition called Inside the Fight to Protect Data from Quantum Computers. I won't play it all to you. If you want to get the whole experience, just hunt for the episode in our back catalogue. It is very easy to find. But here's how Terence set the scene.
The tragedy of security systems in general and cryptography specifically is that unlike other areas of computer science or other areas of software that people might be buying, it's one of the things where you can't demonstrate the most important properties of those systems, right? Like I loved what you said is like, encrypted data just looks like this bunch of gobbledygook. And the problem, and this is relevant to the discussion today, is that well encrypted data and badly encrypted data looks exactly the same, right? You can't. There's no way to demonstrate to somebody that this cryptanalytic algorithm is actually strong because you're looking to demonstrate sort of a negative capability, right? If I come to you with a new graphics card or a new CPU or a new database sorting algorithm, I can demonstrate the things that you care about in terms of, hey, this is faster, this consumes less power, and the rest of it. The tricky business about cryptography is that what you're saying is, I'm going to encrypt this data, and there's a bunch of things that can't happen, right? In a whole universe of possibilities, right? That there is no way to derive the key that's going to sort of unprotect or decrypt this data. And what that means is that you need to be open to a whole universe of possible attacks, sort of known and unknown, right? And this is one of the things that makes it interesting and also, I think, difficult for people in the enterprise space, which is that they're being asked to sort of bet part of their business, or bet the security of their data on these statements, often obscure and subtle kinds of arguments about the strength of these protection mechanisms in a way that can't be demonstrated. So the way that fits into the discussion we're having today is that there is on the horizon potentially a bunch of discontinuous change in the way that people think about computing, and that's quantum computers, right? So there have been lots of other discussions about how quantum computers work and what they can do, but with relevance to the crypto space, there are two algorithms that change fundamentally the way that people can do searches in two different spaces that affect the way that people are going to have to protect data with cryptographic mechanisms. So if there comes to be a practical quantum computer, that is to see something that could implement the AES algorithm, or something that could implement, let's say, RSA or elliptic curve, things like that, is that enough qubits to express those algorithms, then searches become quicker, and not just quicker in a way where a traditional CPU gets faster, or you use a GPU for more computers. It's the algorithms move time from the exponent down to the bottom, which is to say it's the difference between a bubble sort and a quicksort algorithm, which is these differences are dramatic. And for cryptography, that's especially big because you need these search spaces to be big in terms of the cryptographic algorithm has to be efficient encrypting data for the person that's actually using it, but the search space for the attacker has to remain really, really big, right? Because you're relying on it now and in the future. So what's going on now with people looking at what's called post-quantum cryptography algorithms is that they're saying, well, we have to start now. There are no quantum computers right now that can even get close to expressing these algorithms or attacking them. But if we hypothesize that there's a real probability of this happening in, say, 20 or 30 years, we might have data now that is going to be, we want to keep private, or we want to have some expectation of security of that data in the next 20 or 30 years. And also, historically, it has been a slow and arduous process to migrate from one cryptographic algorithm to the other. So, in the payment space, there are still people using triple DES, which is actually a fine algorithm, but that industry has been attempting to move from triple DES to AES for decades, and there's still some of this around. So, the short answer is that the world is changing, and one of those changes that people are anticipating is that there's going to be this fundamentally new kind of computer that's going to alter the way that we have to think about cryptography in terms of throwing away whole classes of algorithms that we use now.
So Terrence, think about the point you were just making as it relates to also kind of the type of data. So as an example, when we think about whether it's transactional data or, let's say, legacy data, you have to hold on to it for many decades, as you kind of referred to as an example. Does it really make a difference as kind of the specific type of information or type of data as far as its resistance to CRQCs or not?
Not really. So in terms of resistance to quantum cryptanalysis, it's fundamentally about the algorithm, not about the data. Where the type of the data becomes relevant and interesting to think about is that you might have to start thinking about, do I have classes of data that the privacy of that data is going to be relevant in a couple of decades, right? So if you're talking about a credit card transaction, probably not. If you're in the government space or you're protecting things that you might realistically have privacy impacts in a couple of decades, yeah, I mean, moving now is probably the case, but also for data outside of the data, the algorithmic thing is we know that moving those algorithms is going to be tough. So there's reasons to start thinking about it now in terms of doing those migrations.
That was Terence Spees, and he also went on to talk about the transition to post-quantum cryptography and migration challenges and timelines. So do go into episode 43, Inside the Fight to Protect Data from Quantum Computers, and listen to the whole of the episode. Thanks for joining us on Reimagining Cyber. Please follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, and goodbye.